Hey, good morning. Good morning. So I want to share something that I'd written about this written about this about 3 days ago, I think. And so I thought I'd do a little short video to add some more context to it. And what I was writing about was these three big attributes for men. And the three big attributes were around spiritual fitness, physical fitness, and financial fitness. And these being important to men, not in a real pathological sense where we needed to be absolute dominant creatures in these three areas. We need to be the strongest, the wealthiest, and the most enlightened. But it's actually the accumulation of those three attributes which gives us a great sense of security in ourselves, but also to those who are connected to us. And I found it's really been really quite interesting because there was a connection between a great book that I read a while ago called not Man's Search for Meaning, but The Way of the Superior Man by David Data. And The Way of the Superior Man, again, very interesting book, and it was suggested to me by a female coach I was working with, and she said, if you read this book and you paid attention to the guidelines and to the ideas that he presented, he said that you would understand what would make you irresistible to a woman, and actually it was and if you haven't read the book, you really should. I think it's a really great read, but one of the things that he had suggested inside this book is that for the masculine presence to be unwavering but not rigid. Meaning that, if a man didn't have a sense of purpose, a man didn't, if he didn't actually have a greater sense of his role on this earth and what he was up to, and if he didn't kind of live his life towards that end, that he would be a very impotent and resentful man on one level or another. And I found it to be an interesting idea, but. If you look at history, if you look at the history and the stories of men going off to war and men hopping in a ship and sailing or always on this adventure and this sense of purpose, and men always being called to adventure, being called to be everything they could be, and when we in the masculine sense, when we lack that sense of fulfillment, we lack that sense of purpose. Well, it'll be recorded, Nicole, so you can always go work out. You can work out and watch this later. But the book, The Way of the Superior Man, when he talks about physical fitness, he talks about spiritual fitness, he talks about financial fitness, and the ability and the fact that if as men, and again, I'm sure on some level this applies to women as well, but I can only speak for my gender. If we're lacking in any one of these three areas, that due to our own apathy, due to our own lack, we pay a heavy cost, right? We pay a heavy cost, and it's not only that we suffer, that everybody that's connected to us suffers, because if we don't feel like we're living up to our potential, whatever that might be, if we don't feel like we're living up to our calling, then it can only have a real detrimental effect on all other levels around us. And what was interesting is that as David Data went to talk about, to discuss this in his book, he referred to, which is, and of course you hear this reference quite often, to the men being men being more stable, women being more chaotic. And it's not, and it wasn't chaos as in being crazy, but men tend to be more, more left brain logical and focused and process orientated. Where typically women were more creative and is the creative flow, right? Which is, on the outside may seem a bit more chaotic. But Dave Data also talked about women coming up and testing men, and like a storm. One metaphor that he gave is that men would be like a captain on a ship, and the woman would be the ocean and the storm and the violence, and he would just push and try to knock the ship off course. And a good captain would be able to read and withstand the storm, and not to push against it, but learn how to navigate the storm. And so, and it was a metaphor in the relationship between men and women. And I thought it was really quite interesting because, that idea, and again, it's not pathological where a man is just putting up with his woman, right? Putting up with her, with the, let's say, the emotional highs and lows of the female presence. So it wasn't that pathological. It was more to the point where that the reason why the woman was the storm connects to another idea from Dr. Jordan Peterson, who said something, and this is more about biology than anything else. He said, if you look at the biology of men and women, and historically, that women were typically weaker, right? So they are physically weaker typically. Though I know some very strong women, but they're physically weaker typically. They are sexually vulnerable, which meant that if they engaged in sexual activity, they could get pregnant, and of course that became a challenge because all of a sudden they're vulnerable physically because of the responsibility of carrying a child to full term and then caring for it after. So both mother and child are quite vulnerable. So the proclivity for women to be more emotionally, more emotionally dynamic, was to partially in part to test the integrity of the man. Now, again, both men and women can be unstable. So I'm not saying that we've all got this figured out on either side of the equation. But what it really came down to was something really kind of interesting, was that if the female presence felt any, so let me back up here. So the female emotional psyche is, let's say, it was evolved to be able to sense weaknesses and potential risk in their chosen partner, right? Or the partner they may choose. So they had put this energy out. So this emotional energy, they would put it out and they would test the male that they were interacting with, and perhaps a prospective mate, or maybe even the current mate. And so if there's any degree of insecurity or instability or weakness they would experience in the man, they would push against it and they would expose it. Now, a spiritually grounded man, and this is ideally coming from a spiritually grounded woman as well. So there's going to be rules to the game. Can't be just pathological on one side, where one side just beating the other one mercifully, right, just to continue to test them. But if you had people that were, let's say, both spiritually grounded in the same set of values and the same ideas, that part of the innate biological makeup of a woman would be to sense potential areas of weakness inside of her partner, and so she would feel it and she would test it out, right, and she would push against it. And the term that we used in our men's group was looking for the chinks in the armor, and the dents and chinks in the armor is what the female psyche would experience. And of course, it would make her insecure. And she'd go, well, it's just, if I push against this man and I feel and I sense these weaknesses in the armor, then a spiritually grounded man who's connected to his partner would see it as an opportunity to grow and elevate. And so when he took the opportunity to grow and elevate that part of his, to fix that part of his armor, right, the armor of him being, the strong spiritual male, the woman in turn could relax and attend to her more feminine essence. And it was this interplay back and forth, and it was a kind of evolutionary process, and it was complementary, right? It was a complementary process. So, and I think what we see it rendered down to, unfortunately, was that the woman is being a bitch and the man is being lazy and apathetic, or he's and we don't see this really dynamic interplay. And I think if we understood that, if we understood our respective roles, and if we respected and were willing to listen to the opinion of others, right, to listen to the opinion of a partner, with humility in a sense and a desire to listen and to learn, so we both could grow together. So the man could grow in his masculine presence, right, because he would, there's chinks in his armor, there's dents in his masculine armor that the woman would lovingly point out and poke him with a stick, and then he would recognize, yes, something that I missed or something that I've been remiss in attending to. So whether it's my health, whether it's my, the financial stability, whether it's my spiritual grounding. And so he in turn would work hard to elevate that, so he would become a better, more solid partner and protector to his partner. And she in turn, again, would be able to relax and become what the expression is now, the divine feminine, and be able to stay in that role more so, right? And became this really beautiful interplay back and forth. So, the way it's described historically, as a spiritual evolution, as a psychic evolution, as a physical evolution, a relationship evolution. I think it's really quite profound. And again, it goes between these two different authors who couldn't be more different. These two different speakers, between David Data and of course his book, The Way of the Superior Man. And of course, Jordan Peterson's conversations around evolutionary biology, where again, it's wired into us. It's wired into, and if we understood this, if we understood our roles more importantly. Part of the reason why, just a while back, I ran a retreat on rituals, on the idea of rituals and the importance of rituals, because again, there's so much stuff missing from our history that was they were necessary blueprints which enabled us to move forward, enabled us to understand what we're going through. So not everything was just oppressive and let's say demonic and I don't know the other word you want to use, but or hopeless, right? I think that's probably the best word I can use, the sense of hopelessness, because we have no framework, and if we have no framework in which to build our lives upon, other than just some general social standards. And if we have no language that we and our partner and our family and maybe our community can share, that we both believe in, and then there really can't be any element of trust. And there's no element of trust, there's no place for dialogue. Because even if you understood the words I'm saying, you may not understand, you may not believe or understand the place where it's coming from, right? And I think that was perhaps one of the benefits of actually having cultures, real cultures. Like North American culture is not a culture; it's a collective of personalities living in the same geographic location. That's hardly a culture. But again, so many beautiful ideas from our past, and again, I think again to the article I wrote just a couple of days ago, and I'm going to read you this last little part here. It said, "It's been interesting to look into my own journey and recognize the areas of resentment that I held on to were the weaknesses in my armor and the cost of my happiness. It's akin to the old story of a warrior who's been lost in the desert, having to come to grips with his own demons and weakness of character, who now has a long journey back to redemption to save his world and in turn save his own soul." And that's I think that's a beautiful purpose, and I think again, it's very masculine in its orientation. Both men and women obviously can have purposes, but again, just speaking for myself, I know when I'm living on purpose, when I'm having these powerful conversations, I'm alive. And it just makes life so much easier when I see life as a profound spiritual journey that, I have to attend to, because, quite often there's more dark than there's light, right? And, especially in Canada at the moment, because it's winter, heading into winter. But we'll never make it through the more challenging times gracefully if we don't have a profound sense of purpose and we don't understand our role specifically inside that journey. And it doesn't make the problems go away. It just makes the problems make sense. And when we see things arise in our world, instead of living with a degree of resentment and fear, we can actually look at it as an opportunity to up-level that parts of ourselves, right? It's a reflection of what's not being attended to inside of our own, our own spiritual fitness, our own physical fitness, our own financial fitness. What are we not paying attention to that we're casting blame on somebody else? So anyhow, just a little morning Sunday chat, time for some breakfast, and hope you guys have a beautiful rest of the day, and we'll talk to you soon.